kind of do a loose, interview kind of format with you. But you and I have to figure out, like, I'm not sure, like, how do we know each other? Like our paths have crossed over our performance career. And I'm trying to figure out how I know you, and I can't remember.
I had a lot of Joseph friends. I remember back and forth. I did a lot of touring during that time. But so you were in Europe with Starlight?
Yeah, I did. We did start after the Broadway company closed in 87, 88. We did the first national tour of Starlight. Then we went to Germany to do it. Then we came home and did the national tour of Joseph with Brian Lane Green and Sam Harris. That was from 94 to 96, and a whole bunch of people, Jody Langle and Bernard Dotson. We know all the same people, which is weird. And then when
Brian Lane Green, I know too from Starmites. I was in high school. I worked on Starmites.
Okay. Okay. So I'm wondering because what I've seen like younger, like older photos of you, and I'm like, wait a minute, were you on so we must have been passing tours together. And then when Joseph closed in the States, then we went back to Germany to do it in Germany in 96, 97.
Okay.
Then came home, went back to the States. Did a couple of, I did Goodspeed with Lorna Venturna and a whole bunch of other people, did the Apple Tree, then went back to Europe for Smokey Joe's Cafe. Joey McNeely hired me as the dance captain.
Yes,
so that's how I started dance captaining in my late 20s, early 30s with the bigger shows. So you and I, we must have been like missing each other because we never worked together, but we know.
Who were your dance teachers? Who were your go-tos? That's the biggest question.
Okay, so this is where I think I remembered you when I was younger. I must have been 24, 25, and I auditioned for Dreamgirls, and the late, great, amazing who mentored you, Tony Stevens, hired me to do Dreamgirls, but it was up in Westchester. You might have even hired me. I don't know. But I ended up going on the Joseph tour instead, and Tony was like, "Oh, girl got a tour, and so he hired me twice. He hired me twice in my life, but then bigger things came up, and I was already married to my husband. My husband and I, we met at Hershey Park. We were college sweethearts, and then we started booking all of our tours and shows together.
Great.
Do you know what I mean? So it was like, oh wait, my husband and I got this national tour. My husband and I got this gig. My husband and I got.
What's your husband's first name?
Peter Lisiaga. Okay. He did a lot of the West Side Stories. So I don't know.
Okay.
Josh Borghese, when Alan Johnson was alive and around, the second national tour, the one in Germany,
for Wolfgang, I did that for a while. And Alan had wanted me to do the 2002, and he put me through the ringer, and I was directing then, and I got an offer that I needed his blessing for, which was so awkward. It was a 3-week. We talked about it before he passed, and I just thanked him because I'd started directing. It was a 3-week tour, and they wanted me to restage the choreography. It was in Italy. It was like an opera tour.
Yes.
That was coming from like Gateway and it was like the weirdest hybrid. And I said, Alan, I really want to do this tour, but I've been asked to go to Italy. And his response was, everybody wants to do this show. And then I said, well, I said, Alan, what do? I want to do your tour. He goes, we're going to Detroit. That's going to Rome. What do you think I want you to do?
Wow.
And then years later, I was like, thank you. He's like, yes, you needed to do what you were doing. He's like,
Wow, Stephen. Okay, so guess what? That's why we have crossed paths.
Yeah.
But those were, Chet Walker, Randy Skinner used to take with him. Who else? Oh gosh, it's been so long. And then up at Steps, Joe Lantieri and Susie Taylor, Mia Michaels. But I was the Broadway.
I was scared of those. I was scared of when I saw Joe's class and I saw Mia's class. I was scared of those. It's so funny because when I was like in my 20s, I was so like was so serious. I was the kid who was afraid of breaking rules and doing something wrong. So I was so serious.
Me too.
And it was funny. It was Tony, I think, that sort of started to pull me out of my shell. Like little by little, I didn't realize it was what he was doing, but he was like, demonstrate the roll up. And I did. And then he's like, a week later, he's like, demonstrate the bar. And I was like, the whole thing? He's like, mm-hmm. So he started pulling me into confidence. And then there was one day he said, you need to be right, don't you? And I said, well, and he goes, just dance.
Ooh, yeah. And that, and that's great. That's like, and for me, that's like words of wisdom now. Like I remember reaching out to you because over the years, because I performed for such a long time. I was a Disney kid. I did Tokyo Disney. Bjork Lee hired me. That was my first big gig as an 18-year-old. You know what I mean? And so, learning from all these amazing people over my life as a performer, and I'm still performing. I'm in my 50s now, but I'm still, acting and voiceover work. My last time on stage was 12 years ago. We did Dreamgirls down here at the Prince in Philly. And
with Rashawn.
Mercedes Ellington choreographed it, and Eugene was in it. All the old heads were in it. Kevin Marrow.
Oh my God. And Jesse Vargas did it.
Jesse Vargas, yes!
And Rashawn Holloway went into it at the end of the run.
At the end, yep.
And Janelle. Yeah. Janelle was in it.
Yep, Janelle. Yeah. So see that we know so many, and you know how our circle is so small anyway.
It's so small.
It's so small. So I try to tell my students, I'm like, look, this circle is small and it's been small forever. So, if you want to do great work, you want your work to follow you and your name, you want to show up on time. So a lot of the stuff that I teach my students, I'm like, it's not about the talent troll, because everybody got talent.
It keeps coming around that the stories about it being small. Like this year, just One Step for Democracy, I met Arnisha. We circled around. We became friends like maybe 15 years ago, really. But I met her when I was in high school, and I had I started with the pen pals. I was like, my parents were not, they appreciated theater, but they were not in it. And if I saw something and I needed to figure it out, big fan of Fame. And then I was doing a theater program when I was a kid, like 11, 12, and my mother goes, you're not going to guess who's filming in the neighborhood. It was Fame.
Wow.
They were filming at Julia Richmond. So every day I would show up and just watch. And one of the PAs was like, you're here every day. Do you want to so I got to know people on the show. I got invited out to the set for the final year. My brother and my sister was looking at USC, and they're like, come to the set. Meanwhile, my mother's like, who are you? What are we doing here? And I would write those fan letters, a couple of things. When I saw, it's funny because I was talking to some friends at the time. When I saw Dreamgirls the first time, my mind was blown. It was like seeing the Beatles. All I knew is I needed to see it again. I needed to figure out how Michael Bennett did what he did, how everybody on stage, how I could be lost in the story and know where I was the whole time without a set. So I wrote Loretta Devine the fan letter, and she wrote back, and we became pen pals for a while. And I used to go and when she was doing the Colored Museum and Big Deal and all of that, she was like, "I'll come backstage." And we were pen pals for a while. And a couple of years ago, because I also wanted to be an artiste. I wanted to draw. I was in studio art classes, and I think I made her a big poster portrait of her in the center of Big Deal, a big old thing. And I made her some portraits, and a friend of hers is like, oh yeah, she still has the portrait. She sends her love. And so it's amazing how circles, But then I wrote the fan letter because I knew some dancers from Fame who got on Dreamgirls, and Stephanie Pope went to my high school ahead of me. So I saw a Big Deal, and I dropped a note backstage saying, I saw you perform on the high school stage. And I said, I don't know where to start studying. And she signed me up at ALE, and I didn't know there was anything different. So I was one of the ALE outside students. And then I did the scholarship audition, but the requirements at that time scared me because my family is not in theater. So I took my first ballet classes, and I was in so much pain the next, so sore. And, my mother was like, maybe you should rest. Maybe don't go this week. And I was like, oh, okay, mom knows everything. And then of course I went the next week. It was just as sore.
It's just a sore. Wow. You know what? I definitely want to, because I know the time is moving, and
sure.
I hope that we don't glitch out. That's my concern is,
okay.
I don't want us to glitch. But I had 3 questions for you. And one of them is, so how did you transition? How did you transition from becoming a performer into being on the other side?
What's interesting is when I think about it, I don't know that it was necessarily a transition, because I think because we talked about this. When I saw Dreamgirls, my head, my mind was blown because I couldn't figure out how it all came together. I couldn't figure, I needed to know. And that I was sort of I guess, always interested in that. The first show I saw was Grease, and I was like, how'd they get a car on stage? What's going on here?
Cool.
I was like 4, and I was like, what? And my brother was very interested in filmmaking and theater. So even at home and at school, he was always talking about how things came together. But I was always interested sort of from the other side as well. My first job in theater, and I was sort of young and didn't know the difference, and I loved any opportunity I could get. And a friend of mine, I remember in chemistry class, he says, oh, my mother wanted me to remind you, she has some friends who are doing crew, you know, in off-Broadway shows. And she's like, maybe you should go volunteer somewhere and see if there's a job. Maybe you should go usher. So I went, okay. So I like had a typewritten resume that said I did some summer like acting programs. I did some acting in school, and had I think I had 4 months of ballet at Ailey at that point, and that was proudly. And I went down to Little Shop of Horrors, and I took this, and I was like, do you have anything that I can do? And the house manager sort of giggled. I was like, oh, you know, now I see it as like, oh, precious. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
And they gave me a job front of house. They gave me, first I was an usher. And they didn't think I'd come back because I was a kid. And I kept coming back. So they gave me more responsibility. And then people were like, hey, you want to learn how to clean the costume? So I started learning that. And then I would sit in on rehearsals, and then I would run. So this is when I was like 14 and 15.
Amazing.
So I started to like absorb. And then after that, I was really just obsessed with like performing, but knowing also how it came together. And as an actor, I was sort of the one who was always sitting by the stage manager's desk or like somewhere near where the director was, just watching, because I couldn't figure out how people made choices or did what they did. Or so basically, I'm trying to think when the first time really was. Chorus Line. I got a benefit of Chorus Line. I was 18. And it ended up being a benefit for a program at NYU that was starting. And they didn't know I went to NYU because I was in Tisch, and I think this was the music school. This was Steinhardt. Yep. And I was at Steps, and I saw there was an open call, and I lost my mind, and I went, and I got it, and I was Mark, and it was a mix of like people who'd done it on Broadway, and other like Mark Esposito was in it, and Nora Brennan was in it, and I was like the newbie. And there were a couple of NYU kids from that program, or one other from Tisch that got it. So all of a sudden, I'm learning Chorus Line in between Carrie Casterly and Angelique, and all these people I'd seen on Broadway. Terrified. Right. I'm not going to say who it was, but it wasn't Carrie or Angelique. It was a relative of somebody's relative who taught the opening, and that was back when I did what people said versus what they were doing. So I had hurt my hip in the audition, but and for years I was broken because of this. But so I would go home every night going, well, I can't walk, but I got to do, you know, like I'm stumbling. But I learned the show. I learned everybody's part. I was like, I don't know why I told you the injury story. I think it's because we talked Star.
Yeah. But that's the nature of what we do as well too. You know, you get injured, and then how do you get past it? You just keep moving, you know?
Well, I had this big fear because I'd seen the show on Broadway, and it was such, you know, when I would study at Ailey with Bruce Hawkins, the studio looked down on Schubert Alley. So I'd see Chorus Line. We'd be at the bar, I'd see Chorus Line. I think I'm Not Rappaport was the other side, and I'd be so happy to turn to Chorus Line, thinking I'd never do it. So I would go home and rehearse after rehearsal. And I started to learn what other people did. And I didn't even know this at the time, but I was taking notes because that's how I remembered in class. So I took a lot of notes. And then the next summer I was asked, I think it was, it might have been Steven Smeltzer. I was like 19 and Surflight was doing it, and they lost somebody. And I think it was for Mike. And I came in and auditioned, and he was interested in me for that. And I said, oh, I know the whole show and I can help, you know. So I became sort of the assistant at that point to that company.
Wow.
And Mike. And then they were doing, this is when I was still non-equity. They had an equity tour that was out, and then it moved to In the Round, a non-equity, and it had moved from like Mitzi to Lois England, who's also in New Jersey. Lois did a Chorus Line and dancing. And Lois was one of my teachers at NYU, and she's like, just got this job. I think I got us the job. And I went, what are you talking about? She's like, I want you to be my assistant director, my assistant choreographer for Chorus Line.
Wow.
So I was like 20. And that was a tour that had Dennis Jones and Amy Spanger, and like, and I didn't quite like have a process yet. You know, I knew that I wanted to tell the truth. So I came from an acting background, which is why I think people kept asking me to do it, because I knew I knew how it came together. I knew that everybody had to like stop trying to get it right and just give over to this is the director and also well, anyway, so she asked me to do that, and I remember she said to me, lie about your age, because I was 20. So there were people that were, I think Dennis was ahead of me at NYU by like a year or two. And I was like,
Right.
I was at Circle in the Square. He's like, well, I would have seen you there. I was like, oh, like, so she said, people won't listen to you, lie about your age. And the other thing was, I did turn 21 on the tour, and then everybody knew.
Right.
But the point of it was, I didn't quite have a process. I knew from the people I'd as a performer. So at one point, I was told by a couple of people who were part of the chorus line circuit at that time, well, if people are not getting it right, Michael Bennett would stand in the wing with his pad. And part of me went, I don't think that's, and then the other part of me was like, they told me to do it. And one night I was in the wing with my pad, and well, it didn't go well. And I knew why. I felt bad, but I was told to do it.
Right.
Because he kept people afraid for their jobs. That's how the show was.
Right. That's why it was so fierce, right?
3-month contracts. If you were not pulling it and he liked you, he'd be in the wing with that pad.
Right.
So I learned a lot about that. And what I learned on that tour was, because I mean, this is non-equity. So we went from the Portland Civic Center, which has a huge stage, huge, where our set fit plus. So we had to expand into like the Waco Hippodrome, which was like something like a 6. Yeah. So my job was to restage the show, sometimes on the bus. When I would get the specs, I would have those Bibles out and I'd be restaging. And by restaging, it was sort of like figuring out how close we could be. And that line, man, I was like, well, we don't really have the width. And they're like, we're doing the line. We're standing in the line.
Right. So everybody's like literally like shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah. So there were some times where I went, okay, if Zach can't be here, I need to know where this goes. I need to know where the exits are. And for me, it was always safety first.
Yeah.
Because I was first cover to 4 people and second cover to everybody else. Oh. And then at one point I was ASM too. So I needed to know it all. But that was when I said, the audience may not have seen this before and I need to show them the truth. So it was literally like my mind went, okay, there are widescreen movies and there's TV. So now I got to think about it like TV. So only these people will do a tag team and the audience will still get this. It was my education on the road. By that time, I'd interned like at Gateway and some other theaters. So I had learned sort of how lighting designers communicated. I've worked with costume design. I worked in the shop of each of them at a certain point. And NYU was really good at bringing people down to earth, especially that first year, with Greg Barnes and all these. You had to do these requirements. You had to really understand.
And I think, and I think that's brilliant. And I think it's amazing. I also think that that's what's missing for this next generation, because they're all about, well, it's me. I want to be on stage. I want to do this. And I'm like, but you have to do the homework. You have to do the grit. Stay there. Like I would sit there like on the Joseph tour and sit there and watch, the riggers and watch the guys do the lighting board and what, like, I was always curious as well too. Like you, I was like, how'd they do that? Then one night when I had off, I came into the theater and I got my mercenary stage hands, my IATSE tour shirt, because I helped them. And that was like great. Like it was hard. Like I had burns from like pulling the ropes and stuff. That was like, I was just like, I bow to you all. You are all amazing. And then on the Starlight tour, them pulling tracks apart and the hydraulics and linking stuff. I was blown away at just how much that they did for us to make sure that we were safe. You know what I mean? That we were singing loud and that we weren't skating off the stage into the darkness, So I really appreciate our crews and what they do, because you don't hear so much about what happens backstage, you know what I mean? And how, like, you as a director, choreographer, you have to work with a whole team, you know what I mean, of people before you even work with your actors. So can you tell me a little bit about a show that you had just done recently that you directed and choreographed, that you needed to really be tight with your, with your team, with your creative team and, your stage managers?
One thing that I do want to talk about real quick was the generosity, because you said people need to know all of this. And with Chorus Line, when we did the tour, I also had to be trained to call it. I was trained to conduct it. So I understood how it all, Fran Liebergall and Murray Snyder sort of explained to me that the show actually breathes with the music, that it's not two separate things. But when we went around the country, people who'd been with the show for years or loved the show would come see it. And, you know, sometimes I get a message backstage saying, you know, would you come talk to this person? So I got to talk to a lot of the lighting assistants, a lot of the people that were on the road as spots, who also sat me down, took me out and explained that Michael, it was all on a breath. So it wasn't just spot hit, it was, this is choreographed, so it's subtle. I mean, the generosity was amazing. So that's one big thing. But yes, a lot of people don't know. They think once they get in the studio, they're like, oh, I can do my work. They don't realize how much you've done to, you know, how much your team has done to do it. I love collaboration. So I'm trying to think of what sort of the most interesting thing was, where a team really has to pull together. One of the, a couple of things. So I've been doing more smaller plays. And if I get to a musical where it's a dance style or something that's out of my realm, I will definitely bring on an associate that understands that world, so we can talk about frame, you know, because there are things, that's been the biggest thing, is when I started in the business in my 20s, I was like, I have to know everything if I'm going to do that. And now it's all about, no, you can learn what you can, but you have to be open to ask the right questions and collaborate.
Awesome.
I love that. But so the Macy's Singing Christmas Tree, that's what I want to talk about. I was part of, I did 3 years last year that went virtual. Mm-hmm. We want to be back. But with Macy's, this Macy's Singing Christmas Tree, so inherently for the process of the performer, you know, there are some people who are professional singers but work for Macy's or for Delta, but inherently it's 150 people that, I think it's 3 days. Is it 3 days? I think they come in on a Monday morning, they get in their hotel, 150 people. They have like a dinner, like Macy's throws them something, and then they're thrown into this huge, wonderful rehearsal. They usually have their vocal parts like on tape and are supposed to know them.
Right.
But Judith Klerman, who's an extraordinary choral arranger and director, and she has her group Essential Voices. She's worked all over with amazing, you know, with the Stokes and with, but she gets these people in the middle of the room. It's a huge circle, right? So within that time, we've seen videos, we've seen pictures of people. What they don't know at this point was the first year, we didn't know what the tree was. So we had to do the whole tech thing of, there were meetings that were literally, wow, okay, what's the physics of this? Because we got to get this big wagon down the street. We have to get people on and off. And what is the physics of this balloon? Because I'm such a math and science nerd. I was like, oh, so only this many people averaging this kind of weight can be on this tier. And like, only like the people who are like my height, like the shorties had to be on the top just by physics, right? Because of the weight. So we had to figure that out. We had to go through, it was an amazing collaborative process. My hat is off to everyone who works year round at the Parade Studio, because none of us knew what it was, right?
Wow.
So that was from scratch. And by the time we got this, this amazing company of singers from all over the country, we had done the physics work, right? We'd figured out how many people basically could fit on each tier,
right?
How they needed to get on and off safely, because that's a big thing, safety first. So, I mean, you know, you have to do the day of, you have to do 2 or 3 evacuation drills for the police and for so they know you know what you're doing.
Right.
So we had a map, we had maps, and we knew which way things needed to flow. But inherently, we were sort of placing people, seeing them for the first time, seeing combinations of people, how they, you know, and I would run around the room like a fool, go smile, or like doing grand jetés just to get people to relax.
Right.
And from that, my team, we went around going, oh, interesting, you know, expression here, or wow, they're into it. And with the physics and with matching, like, how do we get this? Because also, in the design, soprano, alto, tenor, bass are always color coded by what they're wearing. Mm-hmm. So you have to make sure that, you know, you don't, and then it lines up tier to tier. It's amazing. So we've done all that work ahead of time. We're placing people. The first year we had no method to the madness. So I had big sheets of paper like we were planning wedding seating, right?
Right.
because I'd done a lot of event planning. So I had circles that we would then, match up. It's now a 3D rendered computer program. Paul Lopasinski, who is now the producer of The Float, took all the stuff I did every year and he has made it so we can actually 3D render it and see it before we put people on.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So with that is the biggest collaboration probably, because it's something inherently a lot of the people you're working with don't do this every day, right? So it's about finding ways to communicate and sort of make it second nature and easy, because there's a whole panic of I'm going to be this high, I want to get it right, I can't get off the tree on the way, and it's just got to be fun. So it's really the amount of collaboration prior to it. I mean, now there's a little bit of shorthand, but that's probably the biggest event where it's fun, the collaboration's fun, and at some point I realized I took a breath, because everybody has a great time. We do this, they usually do a Thanksgiving luncheon, and I realized, wow, they just had the fun, they just took the ride. Along the way, a lot of people went, wow, how did you figure that out? But that's the biggest collaboration where, you have to have all that done. And it's also, I think, one big thing, taking it back to theater, is the only way that you can really play with your actors and let them play and have freedom is if you've done all that. Yep.
There you go. Yeah. Doing the homework, the preparation before you even get into the studio and before you even have rehearsals and before, because I'm like that too. I'll have it'll look like football plays, you have circles, and I can't draw. Like I remember being in college and we had to learn the Laban notation, and you had to draw the 3D ballerinas, like the stick. Mine were like stick figures. Like I got like C's in that class because I couldn't draw good enough. You know what I mean? To make it 3-dimensional. You remember how they used to make you draw? And I'm like, help, I don't know what I'm doing. Or they would make us write out the terminology. And I'm so glad that my teachers and professors taught us all of that, because that's how we learned. That was the old school. If you were going to go into an audition for Susan Stroman or go into an audition for this person, you better had known your terminology, because they would sit there. And I started off as a dancer singer, basically. And, they would just sit there and rattle the combination off. They wouldn't show you. Or if they showed you one time. Remember that? I remember Tony Stevens doing that one time. And then he would go, all right, now flip it and go in the reverse direction. Go to this diagonal, to that diagonal. And you're like, whoop. You were like, what?
It's funny, because I think a lot of the collaboration and a lot of sort of knowing how much you have to be in it and thinking and aware at all times. I'll never forget it, Bruce Hawkins' class at Alvin Ailey. I'd never done it across the floor before, right? I'd never done it. And I was I went to a math and science school, and I like to be right. And we were doing this across the floor with about mom and a turn and all of this is like a beginner class. But he would watch me and just go, what are you doing? Because if I messed up, I'd stop and think about it.
Oh yeah, no.
Try to fix it. No, I got kicked in the head once, and then he goes, you probably won't stop again, will you? And I went, okay, I get it. But you get it because you were thrown in. It's funny because looking at sort of the generational difference and the way sort of aesthetics are, I realized that probably can't happen now.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because, that would happen at auditions too. People would show off, it was an audition for Tony's Dream. No, it was an audition for, no, it was for Dreamgirls. It was a company that Jennifer was doing, and everybody and their mother was there. And it was a friend of mine kicked me in the head from behind because he was showing off. I was like,
right?
Gotta go on, yeah. Whereas,
wow.
Today be like, medic, sign these papers. Then it was like, I'm sorry. It's like, okay,
exactly, keep going.
I got punched in the face by an understudy in West Side in Europe, because we did the fight choreography, and then adrenaline hit him in the prologue, and I didn't know I was hit. I just remember going, Officer Krupke came, I went, stage left is so far. I didn't know I'd been hit. And then people were like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I'm fine. And my lips started to swell. All this started to swell up, but I was like, the show must go on.
Yep.
And I was on stage with Maria at Dance at the Gym, and I didn't know anything was wrong. And I'm standing there with her, and the lights go full and I start to shake. So this poor actress, Natasha's looking at me like, are you okay? She's got to go meet Marie. She's got to go meet Tony. But it's the kind of thing where we had to go on. The same show, I think Anybody's got elbowed in the face. So she went on for a scene, her nose packed with cotton, and people are like, what is happening? Stage management is brilliant. They took me out. They're like, we're taking you out until you have to shoot him to make sure you're okay.
Yeah, no, really, no. And thank God for stage management too. And it's interesting because we were, from the old school, we were taught, you keep it moving, the show must go on, and then obviously until it gets too dangerous. Like, I mean, I had small accidents or injuries in Starlight Express. Thank God I didn't have anything huge.
Oh my God.
But I saw a lot of just like, okay, dislocated shoulder, knee going to the other side. But it wasn't so much just an accident, but it was so much more so than it was like, okay, you had to do the skate warm up, you had to do the ballet warm up, you had to I was a swing, so we were on I would get thrown on in the middle of a stunt race. I mean, you're jumping with 25 to 30 pounds. I think the guys had maybe 45 pounds of costume on and the helmets, so you can't see. You have your roller skates on. Do you know what I mean? Then you have to go do a like you're jumping over people, like you're doing stunts. They were choreographed stunts. But let me tell you, like, with Arlene Phillips, with Michael Fraley, who was our skate coach back then, he did all the Starlight Expresses for the last 30 years. Everything he would say, I would listen, because I was like, you know what? Nope, I'm not going to get injured. I'm too young. I was in my 20s. I'm like, I got bigger shows to do. You know what I mean? When I get older, I want to do my Ain't Misbehavins' and my Smokey Joe's. I wanted to do more shows. So I'm like, this is not going to be my third and last show. So I would really pay attention and make sure that I was stretched and make sure that I was focused. And like, you had to be super focused as to where you were going, because if you went too far to the left or too far to the right, bye-bye. It was all over.
But you also had to, the big training for the big picture stuff is, it's interesting. I heard Debbie Allen read everybody right before COVID in her class that went about, you need to learn everything and you need to be ready. If there's a solo, you need to know it. And she's like, it's not about ego, it's about your training.
Yep.
And it's interesting because like Chorus Line and West Side were my biggest training in that, because there were people who are like, well, I'm not going to learn this until I know I have understudy rehearsal I'm going on. I did a company of Evita where we're doing Buenos Aires and the tango dancer fell over his ankle in it. And all I'm thinking is, they are going to stop the show. They are going to stop the show. I think it was Paper Mill, and the stage management came out and dragged him off during the number, and we kept going. And I'm like, we are still going.
Yep. Yes.
So I think it was Kevin Burrows. It's usually the two guys with Evita, usually two slouches. And he's like, I got a date with one person with Evita. But it's the kind of thing where you got to be prepared, because if you haven't learned that tango and you're on for that tango, you can't just say, I'm not doing this tango. You have to find a way to communicate.
That's right.
With Chorus Line, luckily, I had a lot of the people who've done it on Broadway who told me stories of, oh, you'll go on as an understudy and everybody will be really generous. And as I became management and understudy, I needed to know I needed to go home and physicalize just the numbers and the spacing of everybody, because what would happen is, if someone got injured or if someone had too much fun, we had a swing for West Side of Europe, Paul Ard, who handed out cards that said, anti-swing, I don't go on for hangovers, I don't go on for family. Fierce. But
right?
with Chorus Line, what would happen is in the opening, or like right before you went on, if somebody got sick, so you're in there as a cut dancer, right? If you're not on, because usually I would go do that in ASM or go take notes, but something very subtle would happen. Like somebody would go, hey, where's Paul? In the opening, you're like, what do you mean, where's Paul? Or all of a sudden the stage manager would be like, you'd be on stage. So I had like a sweatshirt in my dance bag, and I was like, I guess I'm on. Yep. And sometimes as an understudy, you have warning, or you have the false alarms.
Oh yeah.
But I would put the sweatshirt on, the person would come back on, and take it off, and then they go, I don't know if I could do it. And then you put it back on. And you're like, am I on or not? I need to know. Because this would be awkward if I stay on. And West Side, same thing, because all of a sudden, like if you're doing that opening and someone gets injured, you need to know who's covering what and who to expect.
Yep.
Alan had me, the Chino I replaced didn't dance the ballet, but Alan wanted me to cover the ballet. So I was doing the scare to every night backstage, and I was going over my marks and going over what it meant. And one of our sharks, I don't remember if he got injured of too much party, but he was really young, and I was mid-20s. I thought I was the old man on the tour, but he pulled me into the wing. He's like, I can't do it. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I wasn't ready. I didn't have a dance, but I hadn't stretched. And I did that old play, like plie, we're on. And I remember at some point, somebody I think it was right before Act 2 started. I went up to Maria and I said, you're going to see me again in the ballet. And she's like, you're so funny. And I was like, no, she's like, that's so funny. And I was like, okay, she's not getting this. So I did the same with her. He killed your brother. Then all of a sudden she saw me again, like Chino came on again in the ballet. But what was great about it was there's this energy when you're an understudy is that everybody else is also on their game knowing we're with you. And if you don't know where you're going, we'll help you.
Yeah, we're going to help you. Yeah, we're going to push you over there. Yeah.
A friend of mine was telling me a story the first time she went out for Effie and Michael Bennett's Dream Girl. She hadn't had a put in, and she said, my friend was playing Laurel and she got very, very friendly. And I'm like, Laurel's usually not this friendly. And she's like, oh, she was moving me. She was like helping me out the whole time. She was like, Effie, come here. And I was like, I've never seen this moment before. You're in the wrong place.
And thank God, you know, that first cast person was generous enough to be able to take them. Because when you don't get a put in, you know, whether you're an understudy or a swing or whatever, it can be shocking. But at the same time, you're like, all right, I'm breathing, you're breathing, where are we going? And so, but sometimes you just have, like, I know with Starlight, I only did West Side Story once. My husband's done a couple of productions of West Side. And that, I mean, that choreography, it's brutal. And you better be in the right place at the right time. I've done an Evita as well too, same thing. I was actually, I did Evita at the Walnut Street Theater and I was pregnant. I was 5 months pregnant with my son. God. Didn't know I was pregnant until like later on. And I just remembered, you know, getting lifted upside down and doing all kind of things. Are you going out? That's my 17, that's my son. He's going out to play basketball or whatever. So he's going through the garage. Well. It's a family affair in here. But, you know, I just remembered that. I remembered like, okay, well, you know, Mama's balance was getting a little bit. And thank God. Do you know Jonathan Stahl? Do you know Jonathan?
Yes. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Okay. Jonathan was our dance captain at the Walnut, and he was my dance partner. He was fierce. He was like, "Come on, Mama, let's go. I got you." And then he would say, "Oh, do I get hazard pay? Do I get double pay because Nene got a baby?" I'm like, "Shut up." But he was brilliant. Like he would lift me every single night. I had no problems. Meanwhile, you know, and I was in my late 30s then doing the show, almost 40. And, you know, and then the 20-year-olds wouldn't stretch and would get injured. And I'm like, here I am, you know, prego, pregnant and twirling still. So do you know what I mean? If there's just like that sense of we need to continue to, you know, take care of ourselves. And the reasons why I believe that we've been in this business for so long is because our mentors and our teachers taught us that, you know, yes, you need to learn more than just with what you're doing, but also taking care of our bodies as well.
And it's something that I think has always sort of been taught. Tony Stevens said something to me, which really, because he saw me warming up, because I said, because I would get there warm up early, because when I was 18, I was like, how's everybody doing? We're doing a show, whoop, you know, and you know, and then I think I did Chorus Line at 18, and then I did it with a couple of the same people were cast in it as different roles in St. Louis, and 10 years later. I think it was Patrick Boyd I'd done it with at 18. We did it again 10 years later as I think as different roles.
Right.
And we were there an hour early. We were rolling it up, rolling it down. And I was laughing. I was like, we never did this 10 years ago. Nope. I was like, I got to make sure I could do anything. But what I was going to say about learning the big picture, because maybe you've been in this too. I had two experiences. I just forgot one of them, but I'll tell you this other one.
Was it a West Side Story one, or?
This was a chorus line, okay. Because I was probably in my early 20s. So what happened, getting into directing, I'm assisting people. Lois entrusted me with this on the road. She'd come out and see it. We talk about a few things, but she's like, wow, people are on it, because, you know, I was learning that road of sort of how to keep something fresh without making everybody crazy. Right. And I put in a lot of replacements, and so basically then people would ask me to assist them or say, I can't do this company, but I want to send you to do it. And that's sort of, you know, and by that time they were giving me tapes of Michael Bennett directing. There's some I have 3 and 4 people that I heard in the same role. And he wasn't somebody who, he'd give a line reading if he couldn't figure out how to articulate.
Right.
Or he'd just be, but it was interesting. So with Chorus Line, here's my story. I'm on the national tour. I had replaced Dennis Jones as Mike. And I was also all those roles of director on the road and dance captain and all this stuff. Wow. And my grandmother was going to come see my closing show before I put in my replacement, because they were going to move me to Paul. And it was close by. It was in Scranton. So my family came out, and my grandmother, you know, was she had a heart issue that she was I think it was a heart issue. If my mom's watching, she'll either be angry that I said that or whatever. But anyway, my grandmother passed away that day before the show. And I got word at the theater. I got a message as I was doing a put in for the show, just into sound check. And I just remember I didn't know she was gone, but I knew I had to get to the hospital. And I turned to, it was Kim Shriver. She'd been with the show, and I turned to her. I said, can you? And she said, I'll take over this rehearsal. She wasn't management at the time. She said, I'm good. Go. Yeah. And the stage manager took over. My grandmother passed away. I wasn't able to close the role because we were doing hiatus, and then the replacement was going in, and I was going to move. Right. And it was, it was really hard because I sent, my grandmother and I were close, and I sent she was with me. Very interesting. I did a company that I was directing 10 years later. I was not in it. I'd just retired from performing, but my mic in the show was very long-legged. So I was drilling him every day on the number, and sort of pushing him. And his knee went out before like a performance the theater was having that was a gala. And I was getting ready to go home on the train, and there, I get this call saying, bring all your stuff to the theater. I'm like, what? Brought my stuff to the theater. They told me what had happened. I don't know how, long story short, somehow I was on.
Wow. 10
years later, I've been doing Paul for 10 years, but Mike from 10 years before was somehow in my muscle memory.
Wow.
I went on to do the show, and I remember it was this thing where I was so glad that in my mind, I knew where the picture was. It was somewhere in me because I had to learn all the aspects. And we introduced you, say your name, and I stepped back in line and I went, oh, this is for grandma. Like, this is my closing on this. Oh. So it was one of these performances that was I've never been so present. I've never felt that because I had to be, but also emotionally, I knew what it took to get a job. I'd been doing it for so long that when I got the job at the end, I cried like a baby.
Wow.
And the thing about that was, in terms of collaboration, on that show, Jill Slider and Rashawn Holloway. I don't know if you knew Rashawn. He did the Prince Dreamgirls at the end. But Rashawn was an amazing performer, amazing teacher, and he was my associate director and choreographer on many shows. And we had performed around, it's the first time we did it, and there were a couple of things that I had to condense for that line because we were missing a couple people. And my muscle memory would take me somewhere, and as Richie, he'd go, not here. So it's that collaboration you need, and I feel like if people come on stage without that,
right,
it's an interesting thing.
That's amazing how, Stephen, you've been able to wear so many hats. Do you know what I mean? Because that's not always necessarily the case. Of so many people can be that comfortable to be able to ebb and flow between. Now I'm on stage. Well, no, now I'm, assistant directing. Now I'm calling the show. Now I'm over here. Oh, but they need me here. Mm-hmm. And so that's amazing. That is, truly, that's a gift. I truly believe that it is a gift. And even though you've had that training, that's why I'm wondering, even with some of my students, some of them, I told them, I said, hey, maybe some of you are not all going to be on stage. I'm like, so you need to start thinking of other things. Some of them are brilliant with, like, I have a sophomore who's in pre-calculus already. And she had a chance to choreograph her student show, Little Women, like as a student choreographer. So I'm giving her different styles of music and different counts of music. I'm telling her to choreograph on emotion and don't worry about the music. Like, she's more of a theater, she wants to do Broadway and theater baby. Tiny little spitball fire, triple threat. She can sing, she can dance. She booked Matilda at the Walnut Street 3 years ago. A lot of my private students, I kind of get them appointments, because I know people. And I'm like, oh, but you got to hear them. And meanwhile, 5 of my private girls got Matilda, that company, whereas they were up against these other teenagers that, they're Finding Neverland, this tour, the School of Rock tour, they had like 5,000, more credits. But I told my girls, I said, it's not about, the credits, and it's not about what you've done, but who you are and what you do once you get to that audition. You know what I mean? You need to shine, and you need to show them what you can do. And not only your talent, but are you pleasant? Are you on time? Are you, people want to work with people that, we don't want to work with the brats and the attitude and whatever, and roll your eyes and all that. And so I'm like, because we don't have time for that. You know what I mean? I'm like, these directors and producers and your clients, whatever you're doing, they don't have time for the attitude, because they can just go, all right, next girl, next person, 555, So can you Can you give, just like in a nutshell, maybe one or two qualities that you feel as though what you look for as a, director, choreographer? Because, even though we've spoken a lot about you as a performer and your long, amazing career, that you've had from performing to dance captaining to assistant, and you're still doing it. Like you're still, we're ready, right? You were ready for us to go back, whether it's virtually, whether it's in the amphitheater, whether it's back on a national tour, right? Or international tour. I know that you were ready.
Figure it out, yeah.
But what are the two things that you could give to these, to our up and coming talent that, not only do, if they want to perform because they're working on their craft as singers, dancers, actors, whatever it may be, whether it's film and TV, whether it's the theater, and or beyond, so I think I want to call our segment like Broadway and beyond, because we need to think about, well, I'm 18 now, and then I'm 28, and then me, I was like, oh, now I'm 38. Okay, what do I want to do at 48?
Nobody told us nobody told us that we were like had an expiration date. Nobody told us that.
Right, true.
Right?
True, like that's true. So we just kept going. But you know what I mean? For them, like how can they continue to, not just only hone their craft, but there may be other things that they may be talented in that nobody else may see, whether it's writing a music score, mm-hmm. whether it's, they might want to be the sound engineers or lighting designers. We need them.
What the interesting thing about, because we were talking about sort of when we started, there was no internet. You sort of had to write that letter and wait for a response, or, you had, you were lucky if you're able to get it. I will say there are two kind of sensibilities going on. You really see who's passionate about doing this whole thing. You see, and then you see that this generation that's here now is very smart. When the last chorus line I did almost 10 years ago, we did well, what do you do if you can't do what you love anymore? What do you do if something happens and you can't work?
Yep.
And a couple of the dancers that were like early 20s, I just remember one was like, I'm going to go into event planning because you can't do this forever. And I was like, and because I had a spectrum of people who'd been in the business, and one who was early 40s burst out crying, and he said, they didn't tell us. They never told us. We had, and because he said it never hit me. They never told us, that we were that our bodies would change or life would change.
Yep.
What's interesting about this is, I'm such a research nerd. I'm so like, if there's something I don't know about, I get obsessed about, thanks to YouTube, we go down the rabbit holes going, wait, what was that? I need to know more.
Exactly.
But this is actually something that Tony Stevens, I was always sort of curious. I was always curious about everything. So that was, I didn't know though, that there was value in stepping out of maybe your field or yours. Like I would never say, well, maybe I could help write that at a certain time. Now it's sort of, I collaborate with writers or I write, but it's taken me a while. What I learned was, and you kept hearing this as a kid, where you're in acting school, you're in university, and they say first thing everybody says in every class is, if you could think of anything else you do, don't do this.
Yep.
And I never got that. Like I was like, I don't understand.
Right.
But it's also, you kept being told, have a well-rounded life and nurture everything so that you can bring it. And that was something else. I was like, I got to be right when I was in my 20s. And Tony was kind of wonderful because Tony Stevens, I remember I called him when I started directing, because I went through a stretch where I was like lucky to be booked for like 8 months. And then like maybe 4 months where I didn't know what was going on. And I said, Tony, I think you're the only one I can call who will understand this. And he said, we're going to lunch, then we're going to a museum, then we're going to walk in the park. And I said, what? He goes, life.
Yep.
So I think that's a big part of it, is the more that people, if you're focused on one thing, you're not going to see what's out here.
True.
So as long as you follow through, if it's something like what I've noticed a lot, especially during the pandemic, because now there's all this technology, if someone's like, oh, I want to make a film, like I know people that took online courses or found apps, became animators.
Yep.
People, to say, and now they have like, stuff that's out there where they can go to people who've been studying animation and say, what do I have to do? People who became writers, a lot of people became activists. And a lot of people said, well, I've done photography, filmmaking for fun. I want to learn it. So I think it's about realizing what you gravitate towards or what your curiosity is. Because there's no, there's no penalty. That's the whole thing is I think there's this myth that is still sort of out there that if you can't succeed in what you think you should be or what people are telling you should be, that it's failure.
Right.
And I know we all carry it in some way because, we do. But it wasn't until, I think my 30s that people were like, oh, it's not a failure. It's, because 20s, you're like, gotta get right.
Same. Yep.
But I think that's something that even though it might be too early to hear it, it's sort of, I've worked with a lot of younger actors who went, well, I did that. I think I'm going to do this. So that's already, that option is something that's open. That's a mindset that's open a little more now.
True.
But I would say don't count anything out. What I realized along my journey is that there are some things that I didn't do because I was terrified of letting people down or not being able to do it, right? If somebody asked me out of my range.
Yep.
And then I learned that if something is scary because you don't know what it is, like the Macy's thing, my friend Wesley said, what are you doing in November? And I said, I don't know, what am I doing? He's like, do you want to work on a parade? And I went, yes, okay. So a bunch of us got together. We didn't know what that treat was going to be. And, we figured it out together. So I think my biggest thing in terms of different feels is that if something scares you because you don't know what it is, or you don't quite know where to start with it, or you don't know, a lot of times it's people get scared because they don't know what the end product is. They don't know what the end game is.
True.
That's something that you should say yes to, because then you'll know whether or not that's something you want to do, or something that interests you, or even is something that maybe you have the knack for. But if something feels dangerous or sketchy, or then say no. But I think that's the biggest thing, is also the reminder that, so we were talking about that idea that you're failing, is that, what I started telling my cast, because, early on we worked for a lot of director choreographers or management who, either were on a power trip, or because the show, they're dealing with management and money. So they were like, you've got to go on, and,
it's like one of those,
would beat us up. If what I realized as management quickly is that if someone's really injured, or if someone has a family emergency, they're like, but the show, and I'm like, short show, long life.
Yep, that's right.
So that's what I keep telling my students and, actors, if there's something where they really can't do something, or if they have a huge injury, or I think that's something that people need to hear, because, if you have a long life, and the show is one little blip, and that's something that I didn't get.